Welcome to another special edition of In the Labs with Todd. Christmas, of course, wouldn't be Christmas without a nice new game under the tree. And when we were deciding on what projects that we were going to make this year, I thought it'd be fun to make a little maze game, but just not one of those little square ones that you can get almost anywhere. So something that's a little bit more festive and to the theme. So here we have it, our Christmas tree maze game. Now, just hang in there. I'm going to show you in a minute how you can make this in the software, and then we'll take you into the labs and show you how we cut it. It was a lot of fun to make, and it cut pretty fast. Anyway, let's go ahead and show you how we did it in the software. Okay, to get started, I wanted this to be done in VCarve Desktop, so I had to go ahead and create a brand new file. But I really didn't know where to start, so I thought I'd take a look online. I found this great site that I could use to make a Christmas tree maze. Now, I just went with the default settings and generated a maze to see what I'd come up with. Oh, this looked really way too big, but it got me off on the right foot. So I went into my software and I set up a job that was approximately the size of my material that I had available to me. And once I had that done, I thought, well, I better go ahead and draw the size of the marble that I had, which was 10 millimeters round. And then I figured maybe I should draw a grid with the dimensions that I wanted for my channel and then the wall thickness. And I put those numbers in here. So I figured the tree size needed to be much smaller. My actual maze channel was going to be about 16 millimeters wide, and then my walls needed to be 6 millimeters. And I generated that. And this is what I came up with, which was perfect. So I just saved this out and then brought it right into the software. So I scaled it up to fit underneath my grid. And once I did that, I created a series of boxes that I could take and weld together to create my actual maze. And this is what I have in the end. And this turned out really well. And now I just need to take this and create some tooling. Okay, let's go ahead and have a look at the cut files for this project. So I'm going to go into VCarve Desktop and we're going to open an existing file. We're going to look at the Christmas Marble Maze, maze cut file. And we'll click that and we're going to click Open. Now, as always, you're going to get this warning. Please make sure you read and understand this. Change all the tooling so it's safe and appropriate for the tools you have on hand and the material that you're cutting into, okay? And then just click OK once you've got that understood. Now let's go ahead and take a look at my job setup. And you're going to see right away that it's a single-sided job. The width of that job is 400, the height is 500 millimeters, the thickness is 31 millimeters. I'm going to be zeroing off my material surface. My datum is in the bottom left-hand corner. I'm going to use a standard resolution because there is no 3D cuts in here, so I don't need to worry about my modeling resolution. I'm going to use Canadian maple. So we're going to click OK. Now it's going to warn me right away that one of my tool paths is going to cut through my material. I already know that, so I'm going to click OK. Now let's have a look at the layers that I have. So I've set these up for you ahead of time. We've got 5 of them here, and I'm going to turn off these bottom 3, and we're going to start off with this one right there. And that's the one you saw me create a minute ago from that bitmap. Now, this is great and all, but the problem with this is that it has square corners. I have a round tool. So what I did is I went through all of the different corners and I filleted those using the fillet tool in your drawings tab. The outside were all radius, all the outside right angles are radius by the radius of my tool, so half the diameter. So it was a little bit over a little bit over 3.5 millimeters. And that way the tool would fit in there nice and I would be able to see exactly what I was going to get in the end. And then I took all of these inside corners and I radiused those 3 millimeters. The ball just needs to roll around these. It doesn't need to worry. And the tool is going to be running on the outside of this, so it's going to make that nice and round and it will fit everywhere as it needs to. So that's fine. So this is what I had. Now also you'll see that I actually modified my maze just a little bit. The first one that I had was a little bit easy, so I thought if I put in a couple extra walls and made it a little more challenging, it would be a little bit more fun. So I did that here. Now also we're going to turn on our profile. Our profiles are going to be used to profile cut out the actual project from my material, and this inside one, and we're going to use this to pocket down the thickness of my acrylic, which is 3 millimeters. And then I take that particular vector and I offset that in 1 millimeter to give me this insert vector here, which is the actual acrylic I'm going to cut. Now I offsetted that in 1 millimeter, which in the end was a little bit too much. It was a little bit sloppy. So you may want to take that and offset that outwards a little bit if you'd like to, or go ahead and adjust for that in your tooling. If I was going to glue this in permanently, then it wouldn't be a problem. But if it's just going to sit there with the floating top, then you are going to want to make that a slightly tighter fit. And that's going to depend ultimately on the material you're using. And I'm going to include a test file so you can cut a test version of this to make sure everything fits. And I'll get to that in a second. So let's go ahead now and have a look at the tooling for this. So let's bring out our tooling and we'll tile our views. And we'll go back to our drawing tab for a second. So if we have a first look at our first pocket toolpath. This is a cleanup toolpath, and what this is going to do is it's going to clean up this edge of my material for me. If I go ahead and turn on my solid view, you can see that, and that's just going to remove any of the material off the top surface of my project board that I'm using. There was a bit of a finish on it because it's a reused piece of, I believe, countertop, so I had to remove that off of there. So that's going to get rid of that, so we can preview that very quickly. That's nothing special. It's just a pocket toolpath with a 1/4 inch end mill going down just 1 millimeter. So it'll get rid of what I need to. So let's have a look at the acrylic toolpath for me. So this is the pocket for the acrylic. I had to go down 3 millimeters, the thickness of my material, plus the 1 millimeter extra that I had just pocketed out from the edge. So that's why it's 4 millimeters. I used a 1/4 inch end mill for that. It's a very basic offset tooling. It's not a big deal, and I can just go ahead and calculate that and preview that visible toolpath, and that looks pretty nice in the end. Now also what that's going to allow me to do is to have a nice flat top to my maze so that my acrylic will fit on there nice and tight and flat. Now let's have a look at the path toolpath. That's an easy one too. It's just a pocket toolpath. We're going to go down a start depth of 4 millimeters to get past the acrylic step down that I did, and also the step that I did to clean up that edge. So that's the 4 millimeters there. Cut depth is going to be 16 millimeters, which is the same width as the channel that I made. So that way it's a nice square channel, so the ball should move in there nice. It's going to take 5 passes to do that, just using a 1/4 inch end mill, the same one I used before. And we are going to go ahead and name that path, and we'll calculate that, and we'll preview that visible toolpath. And that's what we're going to get in the end from that. And then of course we have a cutout pass, which is a very basic cutout pass, nothing fancy here. It's a profile cut going down the thickness of my material. So that's Z plus 0.2 of a millimeter. So it's going to cut through. It's going to take 5 passes. We're going to go outside that vector. I've added in some tabs in some very strategic locations so that I know it would hold in place. And we can go ahead and just calculate that. And it's going to tell me that I'm going to cut through my material, and that's all right. And then we can preview that visible toolpath. And there we have it in the end. That is our maze, and it cuts out pretty nice in the end. Now, a couple things I was a little bit worried about was whether or not these walls would hold up and the ball would actually travel cleanly through my material, and also whether I was going to get a nice clean cut or not. In the end, I did cut the sample file, and I'll point that out in a second, but that put away all of my worries about whether or not this is going to work or not. So let's close this one down and have a look at the actual acrylic cut file. So let's open up a new file, and I'm going to go down to Christmas Marble Maze acrylic cut file, and we'll open that up, and I'm not going to save any of my changes. And this is the same job setup as before, except for I've changed the thickness of my material to be 3 millimeters. That's the thickness of my acrylic. Everything else is exactly the same. And you have one tool path that's going to cut through your material. That's why I got that warning. Now, I've also flipped this left to right because I'm putting my acrylic upside down on the surface of my machine. That way, I won't be, if I by mistake I scratch it, it won't be on the surface, it'll be on the bottom side of it, okay? Also, there's a protective layer of plastic that I can remove. Okay, it's a very basic toolpath, nothing special about this. I do want to point out one thing. I'm using a special end mill that's made for acrylic cutting. So if we look at my tooling for that, that's it right there, in case you want to know what I was doing. Just click OK. I'm going to cut outside that line, and I'm going to make very thin, very thin tabs on this. That way they're easily going to be broken out, and it's just mainly there to help hold it in place. I do use a bit of double-sided tape in the end to hold it down to my wasteboard, but this will ensure that it doesn't pop out. And also with them being that thin, I can just break them off with my hand. And if we go ahead and calculate that, it's going to tell me I'm going to cut through my material, and I'm going to preview that visible toolpath. So there we have it. Now let's just take a quick look at one of the things I want to point out about the actual sample files that I'm also going to include with this. Okay, these are the two files that we're going to include so you can cut your own test part to make sure everything's going to work fine for you. Let's take a look at the acrylic one. Now I've treated this a bit different here than I did in the project file you just saw. I decided to make my acrylic smaller by using the allowance offset. Using a negative offset here gave me a chance to make the acrylic a little bit smaller to fit in the pocket. And this was the perfect size to make a nice tight fit. And as you can see, that test file worked perfect. Now to the labs to cut the real thing. Okay, we'll start off by screwing down the material to our wasteboard, and then we put in the end mill. This end mill we use for all of these tool paths except for the acrylic one. So this is going to go around and do that, clean up the top edge of the actual maze, but you'll see that it missed a spot on the bottom right. That's because the material wasn't quite flat, so I had to do a bit of sanding a bit later. This cut here is cutting out the pocket for the acrylic to actually fit inside of. And then once this is done, it's going to go ahead and start to cut the actual maze. This was a lot of fun to watch evolve. It did cut really, really well, which I was really happy about. This was the longest tool path. It took about an hour and a half to actually cut, but it was well worth the wait. That maze is looking really sharp. There we have it. Look at that, nice and clean channels. Looks great. Now what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and run the cutout pass. We need to change the dust shoe because this is quite a deep pass, and the longer dust shoe was crimping up underneath the actual router a bit too much. So I decided to swap it out for this one, but it worked just as well as the other. Of course, we used tabs like I pointed out earlier to keep this into the board, and they worked out perfect. I decided to do a bit of sanding while it was still in the board attached to the CNC. Whatever was on that countertop to prepare it, it just kind of bunged up and stuck to my sandpaper. So I took it as far as I could and then left the rest. Took the little saw and cut out those tabs, and this is what we have. It looks great. Now we'll go ahead and swap out that material. We put our acrylic down. I double-sided taped it to our CNC and held it in with those very small tabs. This was a really fast tool path and didn't take long to cut at all. And as you'll see in a second, there's the remainder of one of those tabs at the very top of the tree where the star goes. I just need to push that forward and it popped right off. It fit perfect, but it was a little bit small, but that was okay because I wanted to be able to take it in and out if I needed to. We went ahead and we sanded off those tabs, and then I went around the outside with a really fine piece of sandpaper to get rid of the rest on the back as well. And I decided to use an oil finish. This may not have been the best choice, but it was what we had around in our cabinet. It took a little bit of work to get it out of all of those channels, but it did look really, really good in the end. I suspect once it dries fully, it will look really, really sharp. And there you have it. Well, I hope you enjoyed that. It was a lot of fun to make and a lot of fun to cut in the end. Like I said, I would make a few changes, but for right now, it looks pretty neat, and I think it would look great under anybody's Christmas tree or even out for the kids to play with right now if you wanted to. Well, if you like this video, give it a thumbs up. If you haven't subscribed to our channel, please do. And if you'd like to make your own, just head over to your V&Co account and download it for free. And if you do cut it and make it your own, how about you post a picture of that in the user forum so we can all see it? And if not, if you decide to post it socially, make sure you tag us in it, okay? Anyway, thanks so much. I hope you're still having fun. Hope you're still making great stuff. And most importantly, from all of us here at Vectric, I hope you're keeping safe.